in the chat for folks who want to hear it as well too, that Peter shared with us, Maya. So
He was quicker than me.
Welcome.
Yeah, it had cut and paste, ready to rumble.
Ready to rumble. Happy Friday, fellow sojourners on this journey we call life, growth, wherever we might be. So it is good to see folks, some new faces, some I won't say old friends, but some friends from the past. Hi Nina, good to see you again. So welcomed as we do our monthly get together of a community for the different journeys we are all on for growth and belonging. Many folks we've spent quite a bit of time on Zoom over the last couple of weeks, several days. So back on Zoom again, here we are with my friend partner Maya as we host and learn more about what might be happening. So as we do is if you are new to the group, welcome. If you've been here several times, it's maybe used to the pattern as we go through. We want to make sure we have a connection before content is something we try to put in place. So it's a familiar question, yet it's a different conversation because it's a new day and it's new people. So Maya will put us into breakout rooms and we'll just share for a few minutes about why did we choose to be here today? Why did you choose to invest your time with this community on this sunny day in Northern Ohio and snowy for some folks or whatever might be going on for you folks? So the questions in the chat. We'll move in. I think we'll do about 7 minutes or so. I think Maya will be fine for that. Will be plenty of time to get connected as we move together. More folks are still continuing to come in. Welcome, Peter. Wendy, welcome. Moving to breakouts. Why did you choose to be here today?
Hi, Bob. I think you're on mute.
There we are. Hi, Maya. Well, you put me back in group 2. I hit the wrong button.
Yep.
Thanks.
Try to move you. I don't know if I can. I might have to move you to group 3. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. There you go. Oops. Hi, Peter. Oh, what happened?
Okay, sorry. Let me turn on my mic.
Don't worry.
I clicked on the chat button and I got pushed back somewhere. So
Okay.
where should I go?
Let's try it again.
Somewhere?
See if you get an invitation that pops up. Both of you. I'll send you there now.
Thank you. You're sending it on chat?
Yeah, I don't know why it keeps pulling you guys out. What's happening here? All right. What button are you pressing, Bob? You're on mute. Are you talking to me?
At the moment, I'm not pressing any button.
I was given a prompt that said join group 3, hit push the button, and it kicked me right back.
Let me try one more time.
Okay.
All right, Peter.
And that prompt should be in the chat button.
It should. Are you on the phone or are you on a?
No, I'm on my laptop, my Mac laptop.
It should pop up as like a little pop-up screen that says move to breakout room. Let's see if it works. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a wonderful conversation. It's great to see your smiling faces here. And yeah, just in the spirit of things, what struck you about that conversation you just had? If you want to speak up, feel free to unmute yourself, raise your virtual hand, your real hand, or you can just unmute. We're a small group.
Well, I got to say, we had several new people in our group, and none of us really were quite sure why we were here, except we've been invited by various people. So it was an interesting introduction to each other. We did a lot of laughing.
I'd like to say that if we were invited, there is a greater purpose at work here.
Feels right.
The plethora of topics that we got into was fascinating, from personal journeys to not knowing if I'm a storyteller or not, to quantum physics and the relativity of time. And so it's just the human, the human state of very just connecting us in all different levels and things. And I'll just continue to use my favorite word about this gathering. It's all nourishing.
And I would
And-
add safe. Neurobiologically very safe for us. I think there are cues of safety everywhere with this group.
This is Fatima, and I don't remember who was speaking before Martin spoke.
Oh, that was Jeff, Fatima.
Oh, that was Jeff. Jeff, I would love to at some point understand this notion of a conversation around relativity of time. So I think that might have been an interesting divergent space to go to.
I'll just give credit to Guy. He might want to put in there was a book he recommended, The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli, who's a quantum physicist, and it was interesting where we went on that. So the time, if I understood it, is our own invention of as human beings. So
That's right. It's called The Order of Time, and you can put it in the chat, and I won't take up more space.
Beautiful. Thanks. If Guy is going to throw it in there for me.
Thank you.
All right. Without any further ado, I would like to introduce today's very special storyteller, Peter Pula, who has inspired me over the years, the past couple of years, as a storyteller and a writer myself. Peter is inspiring a new movement, I would call it, an alternative way of telling stories, a new form of journalism called generative journalism, which really gets to the root of and dives deep into individual stories, focuses on the gifts of each of us as individuals. And as part of this process, really integral to generative journalism is convening and asking the right questions. So Peter, before we got started, said, I'm the guy who asks questions, not who gets questions asked to him. And but you know, we're gonna flip it on him today. And so I'll pass it to Jeff, my partner, colleague, to ask the first question.
Beautiful. Thanks, Maya. It is a joy to be here with everybody, and then with our storyteller, Peter Pula, who I've learned over the last many months we've been on the line. I consider a good friend as well as a colleague and a fellow sojourner. So I really appreciate you, Peter, and what you have given to me. So I'm actually I'll start this thing by throwing maybe a little bit of a curveball for the first question, just because that's what's coming to mind. So
Excellent.
How are you feeling about sharing your story today?
A little lost, actually. A little lost. And I think because you and Maya have done a wonderful job of offering some preparatory questions and pre-call, and you have me working through questions I haven't found answers for yet. One of them is around what inspires me to be on this journey, and I even wrestle with what the journey is. So it's been interesting to just contemplate over the last little while. Being asked, and crazy thing is, I'm an intensely introspective person. Maybe that's why I can't find a narrative that sticks. Every time I turn around, there's some other part of the story that shows up. I think that's where I started to read more stories by people who are living in Canada and who are indigenous to the land. And one of the patterns that I found really frustrating when I first started to read these stories is that they would often start very similarly and end totally differently. But I've come to actually appreciate that form because it breaks me from my Western notion that I've got to have a beginning that leads to a particular end. I mean, it can take a twist or turn. I might turn a phrase by accident and then go down that rabbit hole and my whole story changes. So I guess I guess I'm coming in, Jeff, with a feeling of openness to whatever story unfolds around what I have to say or around what happens between and amongst us in the process. I think that's what I can say.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for saying yes to be here as a storyteller. And I think the kickoff question as we kind of have in there is, why did you choose to be on this journey? And then maybe you also reflect on what is the journey that's part of that. So this journey that you choose to be on at this point in time, why have you chosen to be on this journey you're at?
So the best I have for today is that I'm lucky enough to be reading another review copy of Peter's next book. And it's landing for me wonderfully well. I'm going, oh my gosh, this is just smack in the middle of everything again for me. And it's reminding me of an essay I wrote in high school. So I've been like 15 on the origins of the progressive movement, early progressive movement in the US. And the way I remember that story is that the early progressives were noticing the power that the burgeoning power of governments, unions, and monopolies were developing to affect our lives. And they felt the need to distinguish themselves from those entities. So they became interested in anti-corruption. They saw the large unions, large businesses, and state actors as problematic and in collusion, and to distinguish themselves, wanted to essentially reinforce the story of associational life. So the early progressives were people who owned and worked small businesses, locally owned, locally controlled, who took responsibility for the well-being of their community, supported the associational life and civil society organizations to support the well-being of their community, and worked with localized decision-making and their agency and their own power. And way back at 15 or 16 years of age, that seemed very attractive to me. So this, and maybe the journey, Jeff, has been trying to find my way to pay people in places where that's the ethos. But along the way, you know, I got captured by the Harvard Business Review and thought I needed to run my business the way the researchers in the Harvard Business Review suggested I should run my business. A family friend when I was a young man. So I've never actually had a job. I had one job. I worked in industrial demolition, if you can believe that. Managing a crew of like 350 or 60 men 24/7. They took down furnaces in a nickel refinery and rebuilt them every year in the summer, which was interesting because I developed a deep love and appreciation for folks we'd say were grassroots, and sat behind the construction shed and had lunch with these men, some of whom spoke both broken English and French, smoked cigarettes, didn't have teeth, but were doing their damnedest to make sure that their daughter got to go to school. Yeah. So maybe that's when I developed an affinity for real people and direct action and activity. And I think I was kind of brokenhearted at the dissociation that our dominant narrative, the story we have about the world we live in, how that separates us from what's real and what's important. I think I was super frustrated and angry about that. I was also a big fan of newspapers. I wanted to be involved in a cultural milieu that meant something to me, but never found it in the narrative artifacts that were being proffered. And so that led to, I started a newspaper. I got out of university, couldn't find a job, took a job at the Millbrook Times for $50 a week in the apartment above the newsroom, sold the ads, wrote the editorials. I don't know if any of you remember or have ever done it, but we would have text come out on a printer, and we have to cut it with a knife, wax the back of it, place it on a layout board. Balancing columns was a son of a bitch because you had to figure out how many lines you could cut out. And then if you cut out one, you know, so every once in a while you'd open the paper and there's a whole 3 sentences missing. So I figured, well, hey, if these folks can run a newspaper, so can I. So I shook down at Sally and Grandma and promptly discovered that I could spend $100,000 very quickly and still not have a sustainable business. But that led to the Grassroots Review, and my assumption was that the community has everything that it requires to fulfill its aspirations. We just need someone to ask the right questions and tell the resulting stories. And that eventually became, we had the Grassroots Review in 3 different cities, and it was a collaborative news organization where civil society organizations, political parties, often opposing political parties, Chamber of Commerce, they bought 2 pages to carry their news, and they all gave me their mailing lists. So their printing costs all dropped. The content was co-created, and their circulation went up by 15, 20 times. And so this idea of collaborative media making with the generative ethos based on open and strength-based inquiry has kind of been in my DNA, I guess, and a natural expression from that essay as a 15 or 16-year-old fella trying to find a better way to be in the world. I think that's as far as I can get right now, so you have to ask another question. That was fun, though. Thank you.
It's nice. It's so alive. Your story already is just alive with me, Peter. So, curiosity is as you, as I was listening to you, it's a little bit about you found that you related very early on to the grassroots folks. So, what is the relationship for you, or is there a relationship between the destination of moving toward the grassroots and the journey. Is that a destination in mind, the ethos you're looking for? I'm just curious, as I just think about the relationship between the destination and the journey.
You know, I think lately, I think I'm like extremely frustrated, like really frustrated. I'm getting super impatient, and I don't know what that's about, but that's the experience I'm having. I feel like the tools are all in front of us. So, for example, I'm reading about, well, we had a summit yesterday. Jeff, you were there. Ellen was there. Guy, some others I recognize from that call too, and from previous calls here. And we had a few folks, more and more, I'm hearing more visceral impatience with the systems and the dominant narrative. But, you know, like Peter says, the problem with the corner office is the amount of attention we keep giving it. And so maybe that's my frustration, is why do we keep giving all this attention to the corner office? And I think maybe even things around language, like I don't know, for example, that free markets are the problem. I think the stock market's the problem. The farmer's market's the answer. But the farmer's market is a free market of exchange, which has to contend with all the economics of local and non-local influences. Finance isn't the problem either. Global absentee finance is the problem. Community bonds are the answer. Local community bonds and community supported agriculture. So I don't know. I feel like, but then I got to thinking this morning that these tools and devices that are become aberrant when they go to scale are useful when they're localized and in the hands and control of people who will be affected by those decisions that are made. It's not that the tools aren't there. I think it's that the social fabric hasn't been woven yet. And that our relationships become so important and so prevalent in our minds that we can move into working with some of these structures. If you want to take all of your money out of the publicly traded stock markets right now, I don't have any. I am made a choice not to participate in that system. If I had money, where the hell would I put it? I can't walk down to the market center or square in Chelsea, Quebec, and place my money and invest in a local farm or a local bakery or a local startup, or even a few years ago, my then hometown of Peterborough sold their public utility into private hands. There was an effort to sell it to community, but the community couldn't quite put it together quickly enough. And so the city sold the utility to a large public corporation. So it feels to me like the tools are there. We haven't quite cobbled together the architecture. And the only thing I can think of is the reason why is that the social fabric isn't strong enough. So conversations like this to me are really important. And another reason for that is I don't think that it's, when you're doing this stuff locally, you often don't have the breadth and depth and scope to find purchase. You're an island of an alternative rather than woven into something that's larger and resilient. And I don't mean that to say to go to scale, but to be connected with communities who are learning to do this and are developing the courage and the relationships necessary to bring some of these architectures to life in our local environs and to learn from each other. So I feel like we're disparate, perhaps. So maybe I don't know. I was on a mountain with Otto Scharmer and Peter Senge many years ago, thanks to Charles Holmes. And Peter Senge said something that stuck with me, and it was like, given the urgency of the crisis in which we find ourselves, we have little time to do anything other than be gentle. And being gentle is important for relationships, and I think I've tried to carry myself that way for a very long time, but I am getting kind of feisty now. I don't- So I don't know, how do you hold those two? That we must be present and open, not fix, not advise, not guide, not direct. We need to show up in all of our strength and beauty and do the things that we want to do and ask people to come alongside us. And when others ask us to do the same, to come alongside them. Yes. So there's huge character. Like I like to say that every person is a universe, and you can't tell what will happen when two universes collide. So that kind of strength and beauty is a beautiful thing. But until we are in relationship enough to take those steps together, we stay quiet. So I don't know, maybe I'm not frustrated. Maybe I'm in tension. All right, that's what I got for that segment.
So much to potentially unpack. So I think it's just and I you've already shared, Peter, I think we with some of the milestones impact along the way. So it's, other milestones that are coming to mind, and maybe some of the surprises along the way for yourself and other folks that have been on this journey with you. What has caught your attention along this journey from a surprise perspective, whether they be milestones or just stops along the way?
This just in, as we say in the news business, two milestones that come to mind. And I think with a New Commons, which is a space I've convened around convening for, like Axiom News was formed. I'm not as much a journalist as I'm a person who's interested in a different kind of journalism being done. So my role is to convene in architecture and to hold space where folks who are interested in generative journalism can come together and ask generative stories into life. And through that, what we're trying to do is sense into the emerging future. So every interview really does drive at the existential present circumstance of each person we're interviewing, with the view to bringing forth what it is they would like to create in their lives and in their world, and to invite others to join them in it. And we found that as a very powerful change tool. So we learned those patterns and those discoveries. So that was one of the milestones. But another one was in convening the Peterborough Dialogues. We convened a small group, and slowly but surely the group at the center grew and became a hosting circle. And that hosting circle then was able to proliferate these kinds of dialogues through the community at a crazy rate. And I'm starting to feel like we're coming onto that milestone very soon with a New Commons. There's a group of people. So we've been hosting cultivating community calls, very much like this one, every 2 weeks for 3 years. And that has actually generated and woven a social fabric of people who are now working together to support each other in a variety of ways around the world to do this kind of work. And so I think that's a milestone. And the summit we hosted yesterday was a step in that direction. It was a manifestation of having woven a social fabric over a very long period of time, to the point where people who didn't know each other that well really came together to say, hey, let's throw a party and invite community movements from around the world to just collide. And so that's what we did. So I think that's another milestone. And I'd say the pause, Jeff, I suffered either a Kundalini awakening or a psychotic episode as a result of hosting in place with persistence over time to a great degree. And it wasn't until an energy worker came and took me inside and said, how many of these are you doing a week? And I said, 11 to 15. And she says, that's going to rip you to pieces. You need to stop or get some help. I didn't stop and I didn't get help. And the energetic implications of hosting can be very high. And I was not equipped. So I took on transferences and projections that were thrown my way. I realized as we were convening in place that we were opening up all kinds of psychic energies. I don't mean like Ouija boards and stuff like that. I mean just psychical energies. And felt that, oh my Lord, now I'm responsible for this. So I better get out there, get ahead, and learn as fast as I can. And what I did is I did more. I didn't pause. And then I was forced to pause. It's a lot comes up for people when they're confronted with their freedom, when we're confronted with our agency, when we're confronted with our giftedness, when we're confronted with the strength and beauty of others. For example, some of us sit down. This person is starting to expand and to step in and to grow and to move. And sometimes the reaction is, well, I got to take them down, because now I feel I'm being called into my agency and my beauty and my strength just by virtue of their doing that. Rather than say, okay, I can come alongside, I can learn from being in their presence while they're stepping into their strength and beauty. So all kinds of stuff gets thrown out all over the place when you move into a truly generative community. So that was a pause. I wasn't psycho-energetically prepared for the implications of that kind of intensity along the way. I got it now. We're good. Other than the frustration.
Somebody once told me if you aren't frustrated or uncomfortable, you aren't living what you need to be living. So I
There
try
you
to.
go. So I'm on the right track then.
Hey man,
right?
you are
Okay.
where
All right.
you're exceeding it, that the goal to be frustrated to be alive. So
Right.
I'm not sure if I believe that or not, but it's interesting to think about. So Maya?
Well, you can pick up a lot of, yeah, there can be a lot of judgment, a lot of demand. And the projections are insane.
Yeah, I kind of want to, like, I mean, because something that you talk about a lot is, breathing life into conversations, and life isn't always something that's necessarily
Gentle.
awesome. So I wonder, like, what does that mean to you? What does it mean to you to breathe life into conversation?
Well, maybe I go back to that word. We've chosen the word generative to put in front of journalism. And for a thing to be generative, by the definition of that word, it has to have the capacity to create new life. Or to bring something new into being. And so we mentioned time earlier and it being a construct, but I'm not really so sure that it is. I think it marches forward. That's been my experience of it. And we're always unfolding. So to me, to be generative is to invite the next unfolding. And I think that in terms of what it means to breathe life, and are we breathing life? I'm not sure. We're perhaps midwifing. We won't assume that the conception is a result of something that we do by the way we are in questions. Maybe it's invite. A lot of our structures deny and depress and repress. So it's an act of rebellion to invite life out and forward. And life is not predictable. You can plant a collection of seeds, but no two plants are going to come up the same. You don't know what's going to take, what's going to grow, what's going to die, what you got to prune, what's going to repot well. So you pay attention and do your best and see what happens, but you're not in control. So I guess what it means is to invite the unfolding of each person's, I love this phrase, strength and beauty. Invite each soul into the open where they can collide. How is to be receptive and to ask existential questions, which is why I'm so in love with the work Peter does. I've described Peter as a world-class, if not the best question asker on the planet. He interviewed me years ago, maybe 12 years ago. I found myself saying things I'd never even thought before, and probably shaped the next 10 years of my career. Yeah. So maybe what is meant by that is to invite a person's next unfolding, and therefore in community. I don't think you do it on your own. When I say a person's, I mean in the context of community, because that's where we work things out. And then the how is by being present enough and accepting enough. I love the practice of the clearness committee. And this is something Parker Palmer teaches, it's a Quaker practice. It's the highest art form in terms of doing this, as far as I'm concerned. To sit with a person for the sake of the clarity that they have for themselves, and to invite their inner teacher to speak to them about a question they have. And then as a member of that committee, my job is to to ask an open-ended question that does not impose an answer or impose a bias, so that they come to their clarity on what they're looking for. And I think that's a part of inviting life. And that's not easy. Try it sometime. And you know what? It's a sacred responsibility. For example, I see people who coach and ask rhetorical questions. They're guiding a person to some place that the coach thinks that the person should go, rather than where the person actually is prepared to go or wants to go. You can set a person back years. So if you're in that kind of sacred space and in that kind of sacred relationship, be very, very, very careful about the questions you ask. Well, we didn't know where it was going to go, Jeff, so that's where it's gone. Maya. Who wants to ask a question now, right?
It's my biases are coming through. I'm in this sacred space. I'm frozen with the questions to ask. But
well, there's this wonderful caveat in the clearness committee process where we all understand we're working at this very hard. So I mean, we're all in it together. So a person may pose a question, and the subject can say, they can actually feel into the question, and it's almost like rising on a point of order in the old royal protocols of Robert Rules. It's just, let me just sit with the question for a second and sort if that's the question that wants to be asked or answered. So the group can work together to identify the question before it's responded to. And the subject is welcome to say, yeah, I can answer that one, we'll give it a try, or I'd rather answer this question instead, which your question has provoked.
so just maybe I'll, and I would agree with your assessment of Peter Block's gift of asking the questions. So one question he's asked me, and I've asked others, but what's the future you want to see on this journey?
I've noticed Fatima's hand is up, so maybe the future is there.
You wanted to ask,
Type-
you wanted to ask questions. So he's now shifted into the question asker.
Save us, Fatima.
Well, actually, Peter, it's so nice to hear your voice and to see you. I'm grateful. I think that when I asked me earlier, why did I come? I saw your name and I said, I'm going to go. And if he's, sharing, I would love to be in that space. And you just raised so much in your conversation just now. And when we talk about breathing life into a conversation, it's everybody in the space that helps to create the story. And the story that you might want to tell about your journey can only be generated through the questions inside of the context of the whole group. And I'm just very present to this notion of showing up in our strength and beauty. And how do we create space for that? So the questions that I had several questions for you as you were going along the way, right? But the question that I have for you and for myself and for anyone who's on a journey but have not quite uh, uh, articulated what that journey is, because we never asked a question, what's your journey? Not even along the way. Like as we are on our journey, this culture is not a reflective culture. It's not a culture that sits back and say, hey, look, I've been on this journey and this is where I'm going. So
Right.
my question to you is that if you had to go back and reclaim the self that became lost along the journey because you got pulled outside of yourself into a world that we all think we can solve all these problems, right? Where you think that might have been in terms of, and I said lost in space, and this is another conversation about time and space, but sort of lost in space. If you could reclaim that self before you got pulled into the world of the external challenges that we conceive of, what would that be? Where would that be? What would that look like? And those are too many questions. I know you're supposed to ask one and, let you sit with it.
So the where, this is so strange where I'm going to go here. When I was a wee kid, I quit the world. And then came back. And so why the hell did I come back?
Mm.
Because I think it was a choice not to. So maybe the rest of it, all is figuring. Is just making good on that decision.
Well, I tell you, my daughter told me at 9 years old, I'm sitting on the bed with her meditating. She had no clue, and she knew I was dealing with something. And I said, I got to figure this out. And she says, Mommy, you don't have to figure it out. She said, you just have to be. And that was profound.
Yeah.
At 9 years old to say that. I don't have to figure it out. We think we have to figure the world out. We just got to figure us out, because if we can figure us out, and you were talking about the space we create for others to discover or rediscover, that's what we have to come to know, and that's being confronted with our own freedom. So I'm going to stop right there. But
and
maybe that's
maybe that you've got, that's something there, is that it's all this figuring out. Like, for God's sake, why can't I just fucking, sorry, I swear.
Why can't I just be?
Well, yeah, just chill. I haven't figured that out, to be honest.
You're still figuring, huh?
I'm still figuring it. I'm still figuring and figuring and figuring. Although, so I was reading this book, I guess it's making the rounds these days. My partner bought it. Sometimes she buys books and then I read them. What's it called? The Untethered Soul. There's all kinds of stuff in it, but the one thing that sort of struck me was if you had 2 weeks, if you knew you're gone in 2 weeks, how would you feel and what would your life be like? And I actually felt like a sense of relief. I'd just be relaxed because I know the struggle's coming to an end, and I would just relax. I'd let it all go. And I thought, well, if that's the way I meet the end, why don't I meet the rest of life that way? Just relax, man. But I haven't figured it out yet.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Fatima. It's nice to hear your voice again, too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fatima, for asking that question. And it just resonates with me. My grandfather shared something with me yesterday, the law of karma, and he said that everything that comes our way is only coming our way to leave. So there's no reason to you're not supposed to be elated or sad about anything, because everything that's coming your way is coming to leave. So that just stood out for me. As we come to kind of a close, I think it would be nice for us to go back into small groups and have these kind of conversations and talk about what struck us, what's alive for us. So in the spirit of that, I'll be putting you guys into groups of 3 to 4. And we'll be here for about 10 minutes.
All right.
Great.
Thanks, Maya.
Right, welcome back. That could have, thank you, Diane and Fatima. That was very nourishing, and my mind is just, we were talking about the simultaneous feeling of freedom that causes exhilaration and sheer terror at the same time. And how we're living into that. So beautiful. Others, what struck you about that conversation, or has it led to maybe some questions for Peter or for the group as we begin to wrap up this particular gathering of this community? What's showing up for people in a statement or question? Reflection? Guy.
To end on something gentle, and I think that's a word I like from what Peter was saying. And there's an artist who lives not far from me in the UK, and he published a animation book that I think did quite well. Certain Oprah Winfrey got hold of it. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but hey, it's called The Boy, the Fox, the Mole, and the Horse. And in there, on each page, it's about each of those characters. But one thing that a page that really resonated with me, it says, sometimes getting up in the morning is brave and magnificent. And I just love the fact of the word magnificent. And not to be a spoiler, but he goes on a journey and he's lost. And these different characters, whether it be the mole, the fox, they have different attributes that I think could feed in quite gently to some of our discussion from today. So I'll put it in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy, for sharing. Beautiful. Who else? Bye, Martin. Take care, bud. Good to see you. Diane.
Yeah, I'd really appreciate it if Peter would repeat something he said earlier that I wrote down and I didn't quite get the end of. When you mentioned that it's an act of rebellion to something about moving your life forward or outward. It was quotable, so I wanted to get it. I wanted to get what you really said.
That happens sometimes, Jan, and I can never get it back.
I think I get the gist
We
of
have
it.
the recording though, right?
Okay, yeah, I'll wait for the recording. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't remember how that ended.
I'll pull that quote out specifically in the recap, Diane.
Okay, thank you. It was very quotable.
I have this morning posted an invitation to a Tree Fort hangout in 15 minutes. So I don't have any expectation that anyone here would be there, but if you want to check it out, there's the link. Even reading the invitation is
I said, if nothing else, folks, you got to read the invitation because it really made my day in reflection going through as I read it. So
I'm just feeling the hangout Tree Fort vibes today for whatever reason.
all right, we are close to the end of our appointed time. So I know other folks as we move on. So any other resources or connections or things, Peter, you'd like to share with us, how we can stay connected, or invitations into some of the conversations, communities, efforts that you're involved with?
Well, I guess if you're not already part of a New Commons, which is the space I've convened on the Mighty Networks, if you click that Tree Fort Hangout, that'll invite you to get a free membership to that. And then you can see what folks that I'm hanging out with are up to. I think that's maybe the thing that's most alive for me now is that space. So that's in there. Folks like Ellen and Guy are in there. I think Paul, you're in there now as a result of being with us yesterday. Maya's in there. Yeah, some of you are already there.
Peter, is that today or tomorrow? I went there and it says the 25th.
Is that, you know what, it's supposed to be for today because I'm doing something else tomorrow. So it's for today.
Okay. So you just click going.
Yes. And I'll change the date right now.
All right, folks. Well, as we bring this to a close, I encourage you, any old connections, new connections you've made today, I encourage you to reach out, breathe your breath of life into their journey, into your journey. As we continue to do these things, as we move forward, it can be lonely work that we do out there, isolating, and these type of things, just to reach out, that so refreshing to see and hear stories. Again, it's so nourishing, and for me personally, as well as the work we're trying to do. So don't hesitate, reach out, talk. Don't wait to be invited. Go join, go move. Thank you, Peter, for your story, your humanness, and everything that you bring to this world. Continue to be looking forward to the treehouse hangouts, or anything else that might be going on. Invite each of you to continue to stay engaged with this group every month. And truly, invitation, if you have and many people say, I don't have a story, we all have stories. We love to feature you as part of this. It's painless. Hopefully it was painless to kind of run through and to share these pieces. So we are looking for other folks that are interested just to share their stories of this journey of convening, of being with others in community, what it's been like, what you've learned. We really want to continue to keep these conversations going. So please reach out to myself or Maya, or if you have friends, colleagues, acquaintances that you feel you'd like to have their story be told. This is one way to keep this alive in the world. So thank you all for helping make my life alive this morning going forward. Thank you, Maya, for the friendship partnership. I know you've been going through a lot in your world. Safe travels. Maya is heading back to Brazil today from the States. So safe travels after
Don't
Mardi
forget your
Gras,
snowboard.
after Carnival. I don't know if that's good or bad, but getting back to the warmer weather. So to all of you, the next step of your journey, may you all find peace, grace, and some aliveness as you move on. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.
all.
Thank you,
you.
Peter.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you,
Jeff.
Peter.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Maya.
Good.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you,
Bye.
everyone.
Mhm.
Be well.
Safe travels, Maya. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Brad, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I might.
What?
I want to hear your story.
Sounds like you're the next guest, Brad.
Mm,
Mm,
only if you feel up to it. An invitation.
invitation to think
You can
about
say
it.
no.
In that last little break, Peter was in the small group with me. And one of the things that came up in that discussion was Peter's decision at an early age to come back. He left and he decided to come back. And we had a very short but meaningful to me exploratory triggering discussion, not a solution discussion. About two things. One is leaving, coming back, the notion of choice, and the notion of staying is another choice, and the notion of staying both engaged but in life, and leaving life, which is another way of disengaging and completing, or whatever word you want to call it. So there was some pretty existential kind of stuff that we were talking about in there. But the other one that we talked about that popped to mind was Peter said that he left. He said, I left. And what did you say? When you were a little kid, really young age, I left and I decided to come back. And the question that came up was, who was the I?